Hi, and welcome to Home Dance, the channel History and Board Games.
I'm Alexandre.
And I'm Fred. And what we're going to talk about today is an after-action report or first thoughts.
First impressions
on the new edition of Cuba, the Splendid Little War from VPG.
New-ish now?
Yeah, newish. It was released, I think, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, probably.
The previous version was this one, so in the traditional
pizza box
yes. From Victory Point Games. And this is the new edition that was made after Victory Points was
purchased by a tabletop tycoon. Yeah.
Exactly. So new art.
A great new art.
Yeah,
I think
new production. And I think that's probably the first thing that we can say looking at it. The major change is, to be honest,
not the worst.
VPG is not the best at doing art, and this one was not the worst from that publisher.
No,
it was okay.
But if you look at the two covers, it's just like it's the same thing, but it's like with a new coat of paint, and it's better.
And it's a lot refreshed. Yeah. The other thing is that the production overall is not only the art. Like you have a very nice rule book, well laid out, with a lot of nice art.
Yeah. Pre-rounded counters, and just like it's a nice package.
Yeah, it's a very nice package. So
for wargaming standard, it looks like a normal board game.
It actually looks like a normal board game. Yes, exactly. It doesn't look like a game from a traditional war game publisher. Yeah. It is, I would say at this point, a historical board game.
Yeah.
But it is more than that. Maybe we should explain overall the flow of the game. So it looks like it is a card-driven game because you have a lot of cards that you get at the beginning of each round, but it is not a card-driven game. I would say card assisted.
I would say that you need to unlearn. If you approach it thinking it's a CDG, you're gonna
be surprised.
Yeah. But if it's still, the cards are a major factor, but you can do a lot of things with your little resources, and at first you're thinking of it like, oh, my resources are my cards, because that's how like traditional CDGs work. But really, you're working with a lot of the resources, like from your actual resources, which are produced on the board, which is another thing that's interesting. Is there's a little economy. As the Cuban player, you're trying to break the established Spanish economy, and I think that one thing that we repeated a couple of times is it's surprisingly coin-ish.
Yes, that's definitely the impression. Well, first of all, if you've played a lot of Cuba Libre, you look at the map.
Yeah.
You feel at home, like
They didn't change the country in 60 years. They didn't.
You know the places, but also I mean where the trocha are places or the economical centers in Cuba Libre.
And even the revolution starts in the same place, which is actually interesting.
Yeah, in Santiago de Cuba, so you have exactly the same kind of dynamic, you could say, in the beginning. So you're not completely taken off guard. But I think if you approach it as a weird coinish game, I think you're probably more at home, because I mean those things are like
little menus,
like little menus, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, and we'll probably talk about it a bit later. But it feels a bit more like this. So it is an asymmetric two-player game. One player plays the Cuban insurrection, the other plays the Spanish imperial administration, you could say, and at some point you might or might not have the entry of the US in the war.
I think most games the US is probably gonna enter the war, because I don't see the Cubans winning easily without the US intervention. But what you're trying to do is delay the intervention as the Spanish player, which I didn't do. I forgot that in my little menu was a lobby action, which is actually like you can focus on it as like a sort of like dudes on a map war game, but there's a political aspect, there's an economic aspect, which is what's interesting about the game. I think it touches like it touches on a lot of the aspects of the conflict in a pretty efficient package.
Yeah, and that's why I would say it's more coinish. Like the asymmetry is one thing, the fact that it's not only what's happening on the ground, but also what's happening internationally, what's happening nationally for Spain, the public support, which is the main victory condition for me. Like the way for me as the Cuban to win is to erode your public support.
Absolutely.
Like it's not taking control of the map.
No.
In that sense, it's not an area control game or anything like this. And I thought that was the really interesting part. So it felt like, a weird coinish game, even if it works quite differently. As you said, cards are going to be used either for the events that are written on them, but the thing that is interesting is that a lot of those cards are things that you can do for free. Like the event is interesting to you, you play the card, you do the thing. It's not your action. Most of those cards are going to be bonuses, benefits, and stuff like this.
Or mean little tricks that you can
that you can play against the other. And if you have a bunch of cards that you don't like, let's say 3 of them, you just dump them and they become a resource.
Specifically 3 of them. And it's interesting because sometimes you're just like, this is an okay card. It's not like a negative card for me, but I can squeeze it in with 2 like bad cards and just like drop it. But the hand management is very unique because of that resource system. And I think it opens up like a lot of interesting like considerations like strategically. Very unusual too. And
the resources are particularly interesting because you can either spend cards as resources, and to do an action you always need a resource. Most of the time you're going to need 2 as Spain for a command structure reason, which is also quite interesting.
Absolutely, but I also have more resources, which punches into that little asymmetry.
So either you're using your cards or you're using the resources that you have on your player tracker. And the thing that is interesting is that the resources that you spend, it's great. They are there, they're available. But first of all, you can keep them from one round to another. And the more resources you have at the end of a turn, the more cards you're going to draw.
Which are actually resources. It's it's really interesting.
It's really interesting. So you're really trying to find a balance. And you
can do multiple actions in a single turn. But every time you do another action and you add it up, it's like
it's more and more expensive.
More resources. So in order to do like a double whammy, you really need to. And I think like I tried to do one point during the game, and it was too much. But I think that if
because you try to do a triple whammy.
Yeah, a triple whammy. Triple whammy might be a little ambitious, but I think that if you can like pull it off, it can really like I could have like.
But in the end, I actually won the game thanks to a coordinated action, and that's the thing that is really super interesting.
The narrative.
The thing that came up is, so we had a US intervention in 1897 that happened in our game, so a bit early. And that was mostly due to the fact that the Zafra policy was in place. So that's Spain being a bit too aggressive with, I guess,
no more tobacco, no more sugar, and then the U.S. is like, you get less, less resources, but the U.S. wants to get into the
because they're pissed off. They want those resources. So it helped me actually convince the U.S. to enter into the war, and so a bit early on, really early on, like 2 years early or 1 year earlier than what it's supposed to be, the U.S. intervened. And the thing is that the Spanish fleet, that is a bit weak, went from the Caribbean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean to prevent the US units to come from Key West and do a deployment in Cuba.
Because all of a sudden it's like a whole new game that opens up where you have like
more cards,
naval units, more cards. Like you add a whole US deck. But it's also just like you don't know how that naval combat. Well, when it's your first game, you don't know how that naval combat is going to go. And I think I went in with my little Spanish fleet and got crushed by the
that was the
bulldozer.
Is that the thing is that each time Spain is going to lose some units, the public support is going to decrease. Obviously, people at home are being pissed off that a lot of money is being spent for a small island that is really far away from home. And I saw an opportunity. I saw the fleet. The US fleet is way more powerful. I mean, you're in the backyard of the US, so of course it's going to be easier for them to come in strong. And I just moved in and crushed.
Utterly crushed me.
Yeah, completely crushed your fleet, and that was just the 4 points that I needed to actually
to get an instant victory.
Victory, which was actually quite interesting. And what was interesting is that we felt, oh my god, that's really weird, because then what do you do with that fleet? And the thing that was interesting is that we realized after discussing that probably one of the things that you should have done is going into a port and secure it, and then maybe be a bit opportunistic as soon as I do a convoy, then coming and attacking, rather than trying to occupy the Atlantic Ocean straight, because I mean the US are just here. So that was a really
it was a stupid move. I mean, but that's it shows. It's really logical, and that's the thing that I like about the game is that mostly it's the sort of game where whenever you have like a rules question, the answer is pretty logical,
yes,
pretty reasonable. And I also, like we mentioned, that it's coin-ish. Even the conflicts aren't like straightforward. As the Spanish, like I have more troops, but I have to like find your troops. And then even if I find your troops, I still need to win that battle. And there's like a lot of considerations, and I can do like search and destroy parties, which will have like less difficulty like finding your troops.
Yeah.
But then since they're like single units, they're not as strong. And there's this whole game of like, how do I find your units and then destroy them? And then I also have, as the Spanish player, I have like a lot of cards that are like battle cards that really give me an advantage.
Yeah.
And even, we didn't even mention that like there's like a lot of like if you change the general in charge of the battle,
that is in Havana.
You have different bonuses, DRMs, even the number of dice that you have, you can roll. It's very simple, but it packs a lot of nuance in that simple space.
And I think that's the interesting thing, because the base system is when you do an action, most of the actions you're going to have to roll some dice depending on the situation, and it's a bit like a
RPG.
Like an RPG, you need to roll successes, and that's pretty much it. And this is actually works really well to actually have a pretty simple system.
Yeah.
But as you said, it has a lot of nuance, and the nuance is from the situation, from the specific general that you're using, and it's really interesting. Like by the end, you came up with an approach on how to find me and attack me using 2 stacks with different strength. Yeah. One that is actually doing the recon, and then one that is
doing the heavy lifting. And we didn't even mention that you like every turn you probably need to burn some of the fields. Yeah. There's a whole thing about like burning the fields,
like hurting the economy that I rely on, just to make sure that I'm also hurting the political support, the public support in Spain,
and then possibly like hitting that space and then going on moving away. No, there's a lot of like interesting maneuver. Even though it's like a very tight map, it doesn't feel constrained because like the movement is pretty slow. Also, like it's not like you can go from one end of the island to the other end in a single round. It's not going to happen, and
or if it happens, it's going to cost you a lot of resources.
A lot of resources,
and you become a target.
Yeah.
Overall, the thing that I was the most pleasantly surprised by, if I look at and compare it with a game like Cuba Libre, for example, which is an obvious comparison, even if it's 2 very different periods of time. Yeah. Like there is literally 60 years separating those 2 events, and it's not the same kind of game. But it does have some similarities, not only on a surface level, but also in terms of what the game is portraying and how it approaches it. The thing that I really enjoyed in this one is that it was telling a story.
For sure. The narrative was very strong.
The narrative was strong. You have your leaders that are moving around. Some of them can do things better than others. The cards are really well made.
Yeah.
Overall, also the packaging, like the illustrations are really good. It's quite immersive.
No, and some of those events which change the situation drastically, like when they land, you do get that feeling, and you have a little bit of power as a player. Like if I get one of the events that's good for you, I can hold it and try to get it to be played. Maybe like because you shuffle the deck every turn. That's another thing that's interesting and that's pretty unique, is that you'll get like some of those cards that you've seen and that you've like sort of like pushed aside. They can come up in the next turn because it's not like this card is going to be there like for the whole game. And so there's a lot of but it's like at the situation at the beginning of the game, and then once there's the US war entry is also like it changes drastically, and you get that sense of like a shifting conflict. It's not like stale in any way, shape, or form. And it's interesting that like it doesn't feel like a coin like mechanically, but you're doing some things that resemble coin, and it's a little we were saying I think it's a little more accessible to a non-war gamer, because it's still a little less like, I love coin, but it can be a little dry. Yeah. And this feels a little more like more of a game.
Yeah, it feels more of a game, exactly.
Quote unquote game.
Yeah. But and also the fact that it tells a story makes it also more compelling as an experience, I think.
It's a little less abstract.
And it's also it's weird because it's not that it's less complex. I don't know.
I think it's surprisingly, it's not it's not simple. It's a little
It's surprisingly
less,
subtle.
It's not as abstract.
Yeah.
That's
what I would.
Because
exactly.
because it is complex, and I want to play this game again because there's a lot of things that you're gonna do wrong on your first playthrough, just because like either you're focusing on the military aspect of the campaign and not thinking about the political aspect, or there's like you need to juggle a few plates at there's some juggling to do, and I think that it's easy when you haven't played to focus on one thing. And the rounds are pretty like it's pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. It flows pretty fast. And the thing that is interesting is that you need also maybe playing a few rounds or potentially a couple of games to actually figure out some of the basics. Like, how am I good at fighting the Cubans? Like, what's the approach? And I think it's actually quite interesting to have a game like this where you're learning through the game a bit and you want to play it again to see if you can improve your approach and find new ways of doing things. And then the cards are just making things a bit more spicy because it's always going to be a bit different. Yeah. But overall, super good surprise. I had played the older version a while ago, which I enjoyed, but I don't have such strong memories of it. Having played this with this new package and everything, it got me pretty excited. I don't know how good the history behind the game is. That's maybe one thing, a caveat that we should have.
I'm not an expert on the.
Me neither. I know nothing.
I gotta say.
But through the game, I actually picked up quite a few things, like some characters, and it was actually quite interesting, and it made me want to read a bit more about the topic, and it gave you some visibility on what kind of tactics were there.
Yeah, and the general narrative beats do get, like, I don't know if there's like a tilt, I do feel like the game might be written from a more of a Spanish perspective in a way, like maybe. But I'm even then I'm not sure, but I think it does tell its story convincingly. I know I really enjoyed what I was doing all through the game, and I really enjoyed, like, because of the neat presentation. I mean, it's nice to have a historical game that looks like that, like there's and it's not like it looks nice and then you look at the details and there's some like weird like it hasn't been done properly. Like, there's some good graphic design here.
I think the only thing that I was thinking about while I was playing the game, and that's probably something to read more about, but I was surprised that it looked like you were potentially doing some pretty brutal stuff to make sure that you were seeing me. And like nothing that we did either as Cubans or Spain had an impact on the board. It just had an impact for each other, which I think is one of the strengths also of the coin series, is that some things that you do might be beneficial right now, but you're going to have to pay for the consequences of it later. Well, like it's going to create a state on the board that might be problematic.
Possibly the Zafra is an example of that.
But it influences only the US, not the people that are living here.
No, for sure. And even then, like, the only way that I win and lose public support is through, like, either losing units, I lose public support,
or winning units,
or if I start like killing some of my cards will kill like historical figures, and then people are just like yay. That's a bit odd. Like, I would need to think about it a little more carefully. This is why it's not a review. It
is not.
It's like first impressions, and as a gamer, I think like we had a lot of fun. And pretty quickly we were playing the game. We weren't like we had some rules questions, but we weren't like trying to grasp the basics of the game.
And that's the thing.
Even though it's kind of unique.
The rule book was very well made. Like, you have a lot of illustrations. It's very clear. There were a few things where I was thinking, oh, maybe this should be here and this would be there. But honestly, when you come from a wargaming background and you have a rule book like this, you're like, this is neat. Like, it's. I think for a gamer, it might be like a regular, normal Eurogamer. It might be a bit surprising because it kept this system of having numbered rules and everything. But you almost don't see it. It's just that as someone who's experienced to this, it makes reading the rule book that more easy. But very well made rule book.
I think we were mentioning that maybe some more detailed player aids, like action menus, would have been nice.
I think that's my main frustration with the game in the new production, is that everything is really cool, but I'm just thinking that those should have been 4 times bigger. And then you have, like actually a coin menu system, menu card, you will have explanation of...
Because you only have the name of the actions, but you don't know how to...
You don't know the process,
if the process had been on like player aids, I think the game would have been like this much smoother. Yeah,
but then all the rest is really well made. Like you have most of the information that you need. You've got really good information placed on the board. It's really well made. For me, that's a great
the combat is on the board. The search system is on my board. You have your recruitment on your
because that's our asymmetric stuff.
I really enjoyed it, and as I said, like we finished it, and I was thinking of what I had done wrong, and thinking like I want to play it again in order, and I wouldn't even switch sides. You know, I'd still want to play Spain and try to like fine tune my strategy. And then I feel like if I were to play as Cuba, I would be like, oh, this is a whole different game. Yeah. And I think that's really nice. And I'm surprised. I don't know when the original game was released, but I feel like it might be a bit of like an under.
So I think it was 2014.
No, it's not that old.
Yeah, 11 years ago. But I don't know if that was the first or the second printing. I'm not sure. We'll have to check.
Yes.
But
war game.
It's written here. It is a war game. But no, technically it really is. It really is a war game. And I would say the Black Vomit card is better in that edition.
You
literally have someone. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the illustrations are really nice. And as I played the Black Vomit card, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to play this card, and it's called Black Vomit.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. You said that it was a cool name for a metal band.
Yeah, exactly. I think and
I think that's fair. You'll stand by those words.
I stand by that statement.
Good, but it was great.
Absolutely. I think it's like a short, like we need to play it more in order to have a more profound opinion on it. But I honestly, if you're interested in the topic, and if you've played Cuba Libre and you sort of want to like put the history that's in Cuba Libre in perspective, because they're still linked. Like
it is linked. It tells you what happened 60 years before, like, and why the U.S. was so influential.
Why are there so many Americans in Havana City all of a sudden? You know,
and it makes a strong case that their interest is mostly about resources. Yeah. So they're not defending the freedom of the Cuban people. So that's actually pretty well made.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's definitely some interesting stuff in there, and if you've played Cuba Libre and you want to delve into the history of Cuba a little more, I feel like this is a neat little game. And if you're interested in the topic, you just need to come at it knowing that it's not a typical CDG, and it works in a very different way.
But once it clicks,
it clicks.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But that was great. Yeah. Thanks, Alex, for taking time to playing this and talking about this game. If you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe. And if you want to support the show, which would be really awesome, you can donate on Ko-fi, and you will have access to our awesome Discord server where there are great people like Alex.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that would be great. Thanks, and see you soon.
Bye.